radio show like no other. It's Brian Kilmeade.
But are you concerned that this could be read by China as a reason to feel more threatened? Do you think this puts a target on your back?
Well, I don't believe it should be. And that's really our point. Australia has every right to take decisions in our sovereign interests, to provide for our defences, to work with our partners, to create a more stable region.
That is Scott Morrison. He's got the keys to Australia, made a deal with the U.S. He's part of the Quad that was set up under the Trump years to counter the rise militarily and economically of the bully, and that is China. And that is Scott Morrison deciding it's okay to, ham-handedly throw their relationship with France in the street because they were building nuclear subs that were taking way too long, and it wouldn't have been as effective as ours. They could have handled it a lot better. Therefore, they pull the ambassador from France does from from Australia, as well as the U.S., and a lot of feelings are hurt, and they're giving a $66 billion bill to Australia. So there's two messages here. Number one, why are we treating our allies so badly? Number two is the threat of China is so real to the people in the region. It doesn't matter if China feels threatened. They have to protect themselves. With me right now, a guy that lived that reality, former Secretary of State, CIA Director, Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, welcome back.
Great to be with you, Brian. Good morning.
So what do they see in the region that we don't fully comprehend here about the rise of China?
Brian, this is indicative of what I think the Australians have seen and what every country in South China Sea and Southeast Asia has seen. Xi Jinping, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, is intent on regional domination first and ultimately attacking the West, our very republic here in the United States. And I think Prime Minister Morrison saw that. I agree with you. The way that they went about this was a little awkward diplomatically, but I am very happy that Prime Minister Morrison and the Australian people are now prepared to, alongside of us and all the other partners we will need to push back against the Chinese Communist Party. They've been in a Cold War with us for an awfully long time, Brian. And it's time we respond in a way that represents securing American freedom.
You were the chief diplomat. I'm just saying you from the outside, okay? If you call up France and you say, listen, we got these sophisticated nuclear subs. We're going to make this purchase. We see an urgency here. Try to get another customer for France. Maybe there was stuff that we could do. We don't want their businesses to suffer. They're an ally. Why? Not only do we have this historic friendship with France, our first ally, but we also need them to stay with us economically as we look to isolate China, stand with us in various things when it comes to the Middle East. By the way, they've been great on the war on terror. So there's things that can be done, especially with a leader that is so-called happy that Donald Trump's gone. You could have used some of that and softened the fall.
I completely agree with that. Your point about the war on terror, too, the French have been great partners in that. When I was CIA director, I worked closely with them, same as my time as Secretary of State. I give them full credit for the sacrifices that the French people made as well and continue to make. Second, at the very least, notice, Brian, at the very least, call them up and give them a heads up. It sounds like that was not done, certainly in a way that they would have respected. And then you try and help them through the situation. If this was the superior outcome, if this was the best thing to push back against the Chinese Communist Party, then I'm glad we got to that place. But the way they went about it was just completely, you said ham-handed. It was just a diplomatic faux pas. Last thought, we need the entire West. We will need all of Europe, Germany, France, Eastern Europe as well, to come to understand the threat from the Chinese Communist Party the same way that you and I do, Brian. They're going to have to come see that this isn't about choosing between the United States and China. This is about choosing between tyranny, and authoritarianism on one hand, and freedom, liberty, and market-based trading systems on the other.
No question. So there's a few things going on with China. We know the President of the United States, it takes forever through translation, I understand, but it had a 90-minute call with the head of China, almost 2 days after our terrible dismount from Afghanistan, which we'll touch on, at which time we've decided to pull back on a lot of our criticism and in turn for getting breaks when it comes to them buying into climate change. And then we've let go, we engineered the release of the CFO of Huawei in Canada, and the Canadians got their prisoners back. This is a major acquiescence, isn't it?
This is an outrage. The CFO of Huawei was involved in a set of activities to undermine our Iranian sanctions. Make no mistake about it, too, Huawei itself is endeavoring to steal American information each and every day. The Trump administration pushed back on this. One of the things we did was we found this CFO. We knew she'd violated U.S. law. At least we believe she did, and we were prepared to prosecute it. And the Biden administration just gave it up, showing that if you take hostages, which is what the Chinese did, they took two Canadians, two Michaels, great people.
They did nothing.
Did nothing wrong. These were hostages. The Chinese Communist Party took hostages. And now, as the Biden administration did with the Iranians before, they've essentially paid to get the hostages returned. Brian, you know what that leads to, right? More hostages. If you're an American businessman thinking about traveling to China, now you know that if the Chinese have something they really need from the United States, that they're likely to go just take an American and just hang on to them for a couple of years until such time as the Biden administration folds to get them out. This is really dangerous. The other thing, Brian, that we saw this same week with China was the Commerce Secretary and the Biden administration said, we need to do more business. We can't let all this stuff get in the way. We need climate change to be a priority. Whether they're holding 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps is, it's just a tough choice. This administration that does not appear to understand the reality of the threat the Chinese Communist Party poses to each and every one of us.
They did leave your tariffs in place on aluminum and some other products, which I find very interesting. They have reaffirmed your Quad, which I'm heartened by. Which
is fantastic. I agree, Brian.
And the other thing is they don't ever bring up the Abraham Accords. I'm afraid they're tearing that apart. That was such a major victory for you and for the Trump team. It's historic. They don't talk about it ever. But they had to, I understand, Saudi Arabia had what I think are Patriot missiles to protect themselves against the rockets coming from Yemen. We took them back. So they went ahead and bought our Patriot missiles from Greece to get them. Little by little, I'm concerned they're tearing apart your Abraham Accords, which were recognize Israel, will provide you, and Israel wasn't thrilled with it, will provide you with missile defense and some military arms, and there'll be economic benefits, obviously. But are you concerned they're tearing that apart?
I'm worried about it, but the good news on the Abraham Accords is I think the people of those countries, the Emirates, the Bahrainis, the Sudanese, the Moroccans, I think they can see it's better for them. So I think they'll hang on to this tightly. But, boy, the conditions are bad for the expansion. They won't so much as mention the name. There was a meeting in Iraq, of all places, last week, Brian, where senior Iraqi leaders from all of the various tribes and religions got together saying, Iraq wants to become part of the Abraham Accords. And the United States had, through Operation Iraqi Freedom, the OIR guys, issue a statement saying we didn't know anything about the meeting, essentially distancing themselves from an effort inside of Iraq to say, no, we want to become part of civilizational reality and recognize Israel as the rightful Jewish homeland. It's most unfortunate. It's also related to the cuddling of the Iranians going to Vienna to negotiate with this horrible guy who runs Iran, Ibrahim Raisi. We're sitting in Vienna with someone who killed 5,000 of his own people and who continues to do that. I think they have a fundamentally different view of the Middle East. They think Iran is our partner and the Saudis are a real risk to us. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Obviously, the former Secretary of State, our guest, Mike Pompeo. My last question on China is this. As I'm reading some excerpts from Pompeo from the Woodward book, some of them are direct quotes. This is what I can't get my head around. China has infiltrated us on every level. They have great intelligence. Most of their students end up being spies. I mean, what they're doing is so extensive. I just can't get my head around the fact that they actually thought at the highest level, at the defense secretary level, that President Trump, who's stopping every war, was going to bomb them. And that General Milley had to talk them down twice. How could China have such great intelligence and reads on America and actually think President Trump was going to nuke them?
Well, Brian, let me start at the beginning. I've seen excerpts of this. I obviously haven't read Woodward and Costa's book. I don't credit much of what I've seen so far. But suffice it to say, the predicate for the claim that Woodward and Costa are making that there was a crazy administration, that we didn't know what we were doing, wasn't true at the beginning of the administration, wasn't true in the last weeks of the administration. I frankly think the last 8 months of failed foreign policy proved that. But put all that aside for the second. President Trump never contemplated this. The Chinese would have known that as well. Was there something out there where the Chinese were worried about something they saw? We were aggressive. There's no doubt. We were driving ships up the strait in the strait.
Yeah.
We were active in the South China
Sure.
Sea, and the Chinese were very worried about that. We did the right thing. That was the deterrence model. I don't know where Woodward and Costa got their storyline, but I want the American people to know that this was not something that we were contemplating, but we were prepared to push back against the Chinese in every dimension.
Absolutely. So I want to move on to this. This is President Biden last week at the UN.
We've ended 20 years of conflict in Afghanistan. And as we close this period of relentless war, we're opening a new era of relentless diplomacy, of using the power of our development aid to invest in new ways of lifting people up around the world, of renewing and defending democracy, of proving that no matter how challenging or how complex the problems we're going to face, government by and for the people is still the best way to deliver for all of our people.
Is that the message people got from the way we left Afghanistan? I don't understand who wrote that copy. I can't get the way we left. I can't get over it because so many people are still there. We can't even look in our rearview mirror yet. But he wants to, and he thinks that's what we take away from the Afghanistan evacuation.
No, this is divorced from reality in the most fundamental way. What you heard there was the exposition of the internationalist left-wing view of foreign policy of the last 60 years, where international organizations and more money being thrown at these places was the solution, when we know that the reality is that people respect power. They respect people who are straightforward, those of us who are prepared to call out bad actors around the world. No, the message from Afghanistan was that the commitments we made to people weren't going to be honored. And sadly, I suspect that that's what people heard the president's speech at the UN. It's worth noting he didn't mention China once during that entire speech.
He's afraid. I have no idea why. I mean, in one hand, as we talk about the Quad and we talk about building up, and he said he wants to focus there or whatever, I want to get to something else you're doing, and that is, even though a lot of people point to you in 2024 as first about 2022, you're a co-chairman of the National Republican Redistricting Trust. What are you working on? What do you want people to know about this?
So along with Governor Christie, we are working to make sure that Republican legislators all across America, we saw what happened in the voting this last election. We know what the Democrats, through an organization controlled by Eric Holder and Barack Obama, did last time we drew boundaries for congressional races and school boards and city council seats. They litigated till they were blue, till they were Democrat. And the Republicans, we rolled over. We frankly played victim. We do not want that to happen again. So Governor Christie and I are out traveling and raising money to make sure that if you're a state elected official in a state where the Democrats are ignoring fair maps, they won't give Republicans a chance to compete, that we're going to have your back. We're going to have the resources. We'll provide the intellectual firepower and the money you need to make sure that Republicans have the opportunity. Because you and I both know this, Brian. You present good conservative ideas on a district with a fair map, we're going to win an awful lot.
And you have, instead of saying, look what happens if they get elected, we're seeing what happens. And now, right now, you saw a guy take over the White House with between 58 and 62% approval rating. 9 months in, it's at 42%. And that's without a Russia investigation that turned out to be total folly. Lastly, the President of the United States, packed house. He was, it looks like he lost about 50 pounds. He looks happy again. But he said something that I think would have to worry, I guess, this movement and for those people who saw what happened in Georgia last time.
When Stacey Abrams says, I'm not going to concede, that's okay. No problem. Oh, she's not going to concede. She's not going to concede. Of course, having her, I think, might be better than having your existing governor, if you want to know the truth. Might very well be better.
Do you think Stacey Abrams as governor is better than Brian Kemp?
Oh, heck no. I think the president was Josh, and I don't think the president believes that in his heart of hearts either. No, Stacey Abrams is a bad actor. She does not want good things for the people of Georgia. She no more ought to be the governor of Georgia than she ought to be the vice president of the United States of America, which I think are her actual objectives. No, we need to do everything we can, not just in Georgia, but all across America. It's one of the projects Governor Christie and I are working on to make sure that we get good governors, good school board members elected in each of these places with a set of fair maps. No, Stacey Abrams is not my choice, Brian.
But there are Republicans out there that are not your choice, too. But if you guys do not have a margin of error, if you don't unite behind a candidate. I just think that's one thing that Georgia showed everyone.
I'm all about winning. We got to win elections. You see what happens when Nancy Pelosi controls the House. They're about to spend $3.5 trillion of your money. When Chuck Schumer runs the Senate, same thing. President Biden has taken this country in a bad direction last 8 months. We've got to win back the House. We've got to win back the Senate. We need more Republicans, more conservatives elected. We can fight amongst ourselves all we want, but at the end of the day, it's about shirts and skins, and we got to make sure we're successful.
Right. That dates you because that's what we used to do, shirts and skins, all the time. And now you can do it because you're in such great shape. You can now play the Republican Democrat softball game without a shirt on.
Only shirt.
All right, Mr. Secretary, Mike Pompeo, thank you.
So long, Brian.
Back in a moment.